Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Victor Varnado, who's the CEO of SupremeRobot. Victor is a comedian, a game designer, a writer, a filmmaker, a software developer, a cartoonist, and an actor with a remarkable career spanning television, film, and digital media. That's incredible. I mean, I cannot think of two things that I might be able to do other than software. The fact that you have more than two and almost 10 of them, Victor, is just amazing. Before we get started, thank you so much for taking the time. Much appreciate you taking some time to just having this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. Oh, and it's Supreme Robot, not Super Robot. Supreme Robot.
Supreme Robot, my bad. Sorry, Supreme
No
Robot,
problem.
and we'll
No
include the
problem at all.
links as well. But I know I did a quick intro there, but before we get into the loosely defined topic that we do have here, I have a lot of things to talk to you about. If you could just give a brief introduction in your own words about yourself and your business currently to our audience, that'd be great.
Well, I have a tech and media company called Supreme Robot, which is kind of like an incubator. And what that company does is I have like a bunch of different projects and or ideas. Some of them are software, some of them are TV shows, et cetera, whatever. And I develop an IP, and when an IP gets large enough, then that IP gets its own, usually its own company, its own investors, and becomes its own viable, full-fledged company as well. That my company Supreme Robot manages. So it's my ideas and then projects that I grow.
Very nice to hear that. I mentioned to you quickly that we are a startup based out of the Washington D.C. metro area as well. So hopefully we'll find a common ground to maybe even collaborate at some point. So that was good. Thanks for the introduction. The things that you didn't mention in that introduction, the things that are of equal interest to me, just looking at the description I have here about you, Victor, is filmmaking in a career spanning television and media. I have a genuine interest in that space for a number of reasons that we may or may not go into here. So that being the context, can you tell us a little bit about your work that you do that's in that space? I mean, does that tie into software? It's related, or is that just a parallel business, a different set of things that you do?
It actually ties into software very deeply, and in fact, because I write a lot of AI software that helps you as a writer. And in fact, right now I'm writing a screenplay writing software like that works with an screenplay writing software. And the thing that is different from what I do with AI software is that, for instance, when I made software made specifically for writing fiction work, and then the software that I wrote takes care of a lot of times. AI, when it's writing a long story, it has kind of like a narrative drift, and the software that I have has taken away narrative drift, and also the software I have has taken away the problems with hallucination when writing a long form fiction piece too. So like it and the reason that works is because of my background in entertainment, where I was able to build a system that writes in a way that is closer to what I would use when writing for a like an entertainment client.
Wow, that's very interesting and a great place to start because I know little, very little about this. So I'm hoping to learn along the course in the next 40 minutes or so. You mentioned AI writing scripts, right? So let's start there and I'll share a lot of my ignorance along the way as well. It was not too long ago, they had the strike, right, in LA, right? I don't remember the exact window when it happened. It was
Yes.
not too long ago, right, where all the writers were, under a strike because they did not or they do not necessarily want AI to come do the writing. Uh, so how can you help us understand a little bit what is it? I mean, how does this process happen? And if you could help us understand this as it would be to a layman, because a lot of the audience here are mainly developers and engineers and founders of businesses who may not understand how script writing works with and without AI. So if you could just help us understand how it typically worked or traditionally worked over the years and how it has changed. And if the strike that I mentioned there, where people, the artists of the Hollywood film industry, the Writers Association, I'm using the organization loosely, but they protested and things were resolved to some extent. What does that mean in the context of the work that you're doing or have done in the past?
Well, I can't speak for the whole industry, but I can just speak for what I understand. And I can tell you what screenwriting is like for me as a screenwriter before AI and what it is like now with what I'm building. although what I'm building is different from what I see out there in the market. So I can't say that it's like what I'm building is similar to what's out there right now.
Sure.
Yeah. So in the past, to write a movie, uh, I guess you would have to have a idea, a spark for a movie. You would come up with a log line or just like a basic idea for a film. You would expand that to a synopsis. Once you have a synopsis, you might take this to like a full outline that might be a couple of pages long. That outline would be then refined. Once that outline was refined, then you take that, and I would turn it into what's called a step outline. So a step outline is where it's kind of like halfway between an outline and a script. And then by the time I have a outline, I might have like all of my characters design and descriptions for each of the different characters so I can remember like details that I want them to have. Then I would write a full script using my character outlines and my detailed step outline to help me come up with my final full treatment or full script. And then the full, and then what I'm calling a step outline, people might call a treatment. Like it depends like how you refer to it. So that's how script writing works traditionally.
And that's very good to know because I had no idea, and I'm sure a lot of our audience did not. So appreciate that. So that's how it worked traditionally. And now, if you could help us understand how AI, where AI is playing a role, what kind of impact it is having, and how it's changed this process essentially.
Well, again, I can't say how it's changed for everybody. I do know that people are using AI for screenwriting in a lot of different ways. I mean, obviously, people use chatbots and they work on ideas and brainstorming with AI all the time already. What I'm trying to what I'm trying to build is something that helps you along that process by taking away a lot of the administrative tasks that are part of that process and leaves you, the human, with just the creative part of the process. Um, uh, so I would say the, the screenplay writing software that I'm working on, which is different from what I've seen, is takes you through that entire process. For instance, like you'll start with your own like idea. So you, the human, will have to come up with an idea, and then the system will say, okay, based on your idea, this is what I think a synopsis is, and you would look at it as a human, and then you'd say, oh, good or bad, or I want to make some changes, and then you make those changes to the synopsis, and then once the synopsis is done, then it takes that synopsis and then it develops an outline based on that synopsis. So, but along the process, you get a chance to review the synopsis and say to yourself, hey, I want these changes. And then it doesn't take another step until it uses your changes in the process. So then it will develop a full outline. So once a full outline is developed, you'll get a chance to edit that as well before you go to the full like treatment of the movie, which and then leading to the final script. And so at every step as a human, you'll get a chance to edit it, polish it, and turn it into what you want it to be so it tells your own specific story. And the thing that it helps with as a writer is that you as a writer, you know that you can get from your idea to your final script if you go over these specific steps. But sometimes getting from step to step or going through the process just takes an excruciatingly long amount of time. And it's great to have a system which can take your idea and really just help you elaborate upon your idea in each step and makes it easier for you to move forward.
Victor, thank you. Usually, thank you at the end of the podcast. I want to thank you along the way because to me, like I said, I have a personal interest in this. I try
Mm-hmm.
to create content where I can to the extent I'm able to just to help our business. So I'm genuinely interested in a lot of things that you're sharing here, even at a personal level. So appreciate the details in your response because I think the devil is always in the detail. And hearing it from somebody who's doing it or has done it or continues to do it is very different from somebody who's studying that, reading material, right? So I can
Mm-hmm.
tell based on the specificity of your response how much of it you've done yourself and how long you've done it. So appreciate that. So the many questions I have to help understand the process along the way. And you answered some of them. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper to the extent I can. You mentioned the separation between the creative part and the part that was more, I know I'm paraphrasing what you said, but the non creative part, the more laborious process, if you will, that goes alongside doing this whole thing. how do you create that separation between what's creative and what's not? I'm going to ask this as a layman because that's what I am in the context of this conversation. The context and the question really are, I'm going to take a preposterous example, if you will. Let's say, let me take Quentin Tarantino, right? One of my favorite writers of all times, and to a lot of other people as well. You look at his writing, and maybe there's one end of the spectrum as to how good someone can be as a writer. And then you can look at AI assisting with that writing. One of my high level questions, the 50,000 foot Victor, is AI is primarily driven off of large language models, right? LLMs essentially, which get richer and richer and better the more and more data gets fed into them. But the point being, they derive their intelligence, or they have traditionally up until this point for the most part, on data and information that's been fed to them. A lot of data, sure, but regardless, data that's been fed to them. I can ask AI to help me create something. I know it's not, you didn't talk about the creative part, but I just want to still have to ask this question. I can have AI say, maybe write something like Clint Eastwood, or like Quentin Tarantino, or like Christopher Nolan. But if those people were not have done this to begin with, AI does not have anything to go off of. So that's my first question. Creativity cannot, I mean, do you see creativity be assisted by AI? Or should we start the conversation with, nope, creativity is all human. We can only use these tools to do everything else that's more mundane and laborious, but not the creative part.
I think creativity can definitely be assisted by AI all the time. I think that that's a normal part of using AI as a tool. And I'm a creative person, and I use AI all the time, every day.
Okay, and how could you take an example? Like, to my random example here, that I cannot say go write something like Quentin Tarantino because it just goes off of it. If that were a line of argument, what would the response to that be? Meaning, you get creative as a writer, having the tool look up other writers and sort of plagiarize, if you will.
I mean, that's not. I don't think that's how I use AI to look up other writers and plagiarize them. I use AI to help me like elaborate on my own ideas. I mean, I suppose you could do that, but I mean, I don't. That's not how I use AI. I don't know. I don't
No, no,
understand.
I'm sure not. No, no, I know you don't. I'm just asking this in a general context.
Well, I mean, but your question is, should you use AI to steal writers' work?
No, no, of course not, right? My question is, if I relied on AI to
Right.
actually assist me with the writing, am I losing the whole notion of creativity from the get go? In other words, it is not plagiarizing. I'm saying
No, not at
it's
all.
driving.
You're not. You're not losing creativity. I think that. I think a lot of people feel threatened by AI in the creative community, and especially those people who feel that that they that that they especially like lower level writing jobs, like as a copywriter, maybe is like threatened harshly by AI, and I think that that also translates to a lot of people saying things about AI, like AI can never do this, and AI can never help you be creative, and AI is dead, and blah blah, and dead inside, and soulless, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. But there's not even that those are examples, like at least of people using AI to be creative, that are, I think, useful examples or examples of high level creativity with AI. I mean, AI, like I've said it 1,000 times, is a tool, and just like any tool, like a hammer, like say a hammer, you know how to use a hammer, right? But an artist can sculpt with a hammer. So if you can use AI, you can also, as an artist, use AI like an exquisite tool rather than just a mallet. And most people use it as a mallet. And if you're going to AI and you're saying, "Hey, write me a script like Quentin Tarantino," you're using it like a mallet, and that's not
Okay, so
correct.
so you need to figure out where best to use the tool to assist you so you can be more productive and
Yes.
it doesn't hurt your creative process and help your process, right? So you mentioned some already there. So if a writer or somebody who's building software in this space needs to learn a thing or two, what are some areas in the world of writing that AI can, you mentioned some, I don't know if there's more, or if you could take an example and elaborate on how it was done without AI. And if you already answered that, my apologies. If not, what are some of the tools that you're using, Victor, that helps you improve this process in terms of, is it more scalability, meaning are you able to churn out more scripts and more writing, or are you able to better the quality of the scripts being written? How are some of the specific ways that AI has made an impact, and what are some of the AI tools that you're specifically using in assisting your process?
The thing that I use most to assist my writing process is any chatbot. Any chatbot works. The thing that AI does for me as a creative is I used to get stuck all the time, and now I don't get stuck. So, like in the past, I would get stuck, but right now, if I can explain why I'm stuck to AI, then AI will give me a list of suggestions, which help me get unstuck. And I didn't have that. I didn't have that in the past. Now that's a huge deal. That's not just with writing. That's with any project. In fact, the so when I was talking about working with the screenplay writing software, so I was using the fiction writing software that I wrote for prose as a model. I was able to go to the app that I had previously built, have AI. I used AI to talk to the code, and I was like, "Hey, I built this app previously. I want to use some of this framework to help me write a screenplay writing software because I like A, B, and C from this app. Can you help me do that?" And it gave me an entire schematic of the app that I had already built and how it could be adapted for this new app, which saved me so much work.
I can imagine. That's an amazing example. So where did you enter those prompts? Like, was it a particular LLM that you were using or certain model specifically to help you with that process?
In this case, I was using ChatGPT and I was using Lovable, lovable.dev.
Yep, I do. Yep.
Okay, so I was using ChatGPT to help me come up with the best version of questions. And then I would put those questions in lovable.dev, and lovable.dev would give me detailed responses. So, because the Magic Fiction Writer, I developed it with lovable.dev, and then I started it with lovable.dev, but then I finished it, traditionally, and made sure, like, fix wonky parts that happen
Right.
with AI building.
Actually, let's dig deeper there because I had a recent conversation where we talked. I talked to a founder, Victor, who was working for a company in the software space, but they were not a developer. They're not a developer, but they still wanted to get this MVP done. They probably even gone to production, and they hired two people from college, right, they hadn't even graduated, right, second year, third year in college, and they were able to get this going. Something that was not necessarily possible. I almost want to say impossible for a lot of the people pre-AI, where code generation was available. And she shared some wonderful experiences with me, the founder, as to how, with very little money or time or experience or direct expertise on coding and whatnot, she was able to get this going. And we had a fairly detailed conversation around it. And what you're telling me right now is along those lines. So I want to find out now. You said you were able to use Lovable, and you're able to get the prompts and stick that there and say, hey, generate some code, or perhaps improve the existing code, or maybe find the components from the existing code base that I can potentially reuse, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, just so I can ask a more specific next question, you said you are also an engine developer, right? You're able to write software, correct?
Yes.
So let's say if you were not, let's say if you had to cosplay or pretend to be somebody who were not a developer, do you think you'd still have been able to do a lot of what you were able to do now because of these tools, or do you think there was still a gap, and if so, what was that gap?
I don't think I would be able to finish the apps that I finished if I didn't have my developer background. The the thing about Lovable is that there are those users who are not coders who use Lovable, and a lot of the time they will skim through or barely read the responses from Lovable and then just say yes, yes, move forward, go, 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 because they're not, whether or not you're a developer, Lovable will respond to you and give you information that a developer should know. And
Okay.
if you don't know what those responses mean or how to respond to them correctly, and you're just like, but that's why people talk so much about like having like trash or terrible experiences with Lovable building, and they're stuck on a mistake for hours and hours and hours because they just don't understand the process of what's happening. And if you don't understand it, even though Lovable will tell you what it's doing, and then you'll either see that it's doing something different from what you want it to do, or you'll see that it's doing something different that you want it to do that is wrong. So like for instance, it could be chugging ahead full speed, and if you don't understand the difference between a positive output from what you asked for and a negative output, if you don't understand the difference, it could still make you a working app that is doing the wrong thing, and you don't even know what that looks like or how to resolve it. So like if you don't have developer skill, like you can only go so far, because at some point the system is going to be making mistakes that are outside your ability to police.
No, you explained that beautifully. I like the way you put it there. Let me ask a follow-up question, right? So let's say if I went with the default answers to all the prompts or the questions that Lovable did ask me, you said that it'll still generate software, maybe get it working, but maybe not get it working either the way you wanted it, or maybe it will perhaps create the wrong thing because it just did not understand your responses. But let's say I did not answer them so poorly, or maybe the questions did not make a dramatic difference in a hypothetical scenario. I am able to build that as a non-developer, right? So here is one of the questions I try to ask of all the people who are founders who join me on the podcast. Without these code generation tools, we'll talk low code, no code, maybe if you get a chance, but without these code generating platforms, you had no choice as a non-engineer, non-developer. You had to spend money and hire somebody to help you do, right? There were no other options available, but now you have a plenty of options. How close is that? Let's say if I did not get the answers to the prompts and the questions wrong there, Victor, how close to production do you think the code generation happens to be? Is it 60% of the way there, 80% of the way there, or can I go all the way through to MVP without actually understanding a single line of code?
You can definitely you can go all the way through to MVP if your app is really simple. If your app is complicated, then I think you can get to maybe like 70%. So
Which is actually it's very
no,
good,
it's pretty
two-thirds of the way.
good. It
Yeah.
is pretty good. It's pretty good. It saves a lot of time. But if your app is very simple, you can go all the way to launch.
Okay. So let's say 70% is a great number. Let's work off of that, right? I don't even want to go all the way to launch. Now, maybe let me ask one question before I raise myself back. Now, when we talk all the way there, or 70% of the way there for complex apps, that's MVP. Going from MVP to something that's production ready, do you see these tools, how much do you see these tools assist somebody as a non-developer? Do you think that's also a possibility, or is it like, hey, you know what, it takes you all the way up through MVP, but beyond that you have to now really look into hiring a developer? Would that be the answer?
I think you need a developer because you need someone who understands like you need someone who really understands like how to solve like record security level, like row level security issues for records and things like that, like like when they don't seem to make sense, like how to you kind of need someone who's like, oh, there's a storage issue, like that. You need someone who knows that kind of thing because the AI isn't there yet to do very, very, very high level policing on the front end and back end. I mean, for them, there are there like I feel like if you're a dev, you can use generative AI as coding to get very, very, very far. But it does like, especially when you're working with a complicated app, like it gets to the point where you just have to have somebody that knows what they're doing for the high level
Okay,
stuff.
that makes sense. Now let me take the question further. We need that person to make those difficult decisions or more complex
Mhm.
decisions, or ask the right questions, or maybe write some code as well, right? Many part question. The first part is, what percentage of the code, even in a complex, right? Complex is a very subjective word, but let's say a not so simple app as an example, what percentage of the code by the time the app goes to production do you see it being generated versus literally handwritten by a human?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. I would say that like 95% of the code like on Magic Fiction Writer was written by a computer.
Amazing, incredible. I've gotten similar answers, but again, it depends on the complexity of the product. But even that is such a number, it's a very interesting number and a scary number if you're a developer listening to this, also, right? But let me ask you this. So,
But it was driven by a developer. Like it wouldn't have happened without a developer at the. It just made my work fast.
Absolutely. And the type of developer, I'm talking about all kinds of impact that AI is having in this space. That's the context of my questions here. So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the developer that you do need to assist this process, right, to assist AI or vice versa, AI assisting the developer, can we say that that's mostly a mid-level or a senior developer, because you don't need a junior developer that either knows only as much as AI already does or pass? So would that engineer or the developer being there would be a much senior engineer who's done this for many years?
Yes, I think so. I would say I'm a mid to senior level developer. I'm a senior level engineer, but a mid to senior level developer. I was let me pull myself back down to mid level developer, senior level engineer. Okay, I'm a great engineer, but I have a senior level developer on my team too. And I definitely know the difference, which is why I degraded. I downgraded myself because I was like, if he was listening to this, he'd be like,
That's funny.
he'd definitely be like, you
Appreciate the
don't even say
honesty there.
senior with your name when it comes to developer. Anyways, but I'm the guy who I'm the guy. I'm the architect of all the software we make.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but there's even so even for me when we're doing like some of the final stuff for some of the apps, like I need him, to step in for some of the final pieces and some of the very delicate things. Like he has to be the guy.
Correct. So, which means in this example, you would not have hired a junior developer because
Mm.
that person may or may not have been able to help you, which means that you'll see hopefully where I'm going with this. Does that mean with all these code assist tools available today and they're only going to improve over time, the need for junior engineers, and Mark Zuckerberg actually did say this on one of the podcasts, if I remember correctly, that Meta has been primarily hiring only senior developers because they don't see a need for junior engineers, or certainly not as much anymore. Would you agree then, Victor, then the future is going in a direction, at least in the near term, where you have software teams with non developers and senior developers, but you don't have junior or mid level developers? For the most
I
part, for the most part.
That sounds. I mean, that's true. I think you probably. I mean, I think there's still a place for mid-level developers, but I mean, but yeah, I feel like if I were a large company, I would hire senior level developers more than anything else.
Which probably exactly what he's saying, right? $1.8 trillion company, which is an important thing to note and emphasize, which is why I'm trying to call out for these things as we go. And then in terms of the composition of the team, right? Let's say if you were doing the exact same thing that you're doing right now in this example that you have taken, let's say about, I don't know, 2 years, or maybe let's make it even more difficult, right? 4 years or 5 years before, right? In 2020, during the pandemic, you were building software similar to this. And let's say you did not have all of the tools, a lot of the tools were not there. There were some code assist tools and code generation tools, but for the purpose of this question, Victor, please assume that there weren't that many or anything that was good enough to use. What would the composition of your this team that you have, look like then in terms of the roles that the folks in the team played and the numbers of those people that the team comprised of? Fast forward 5 years, Victor is doing the same thing, but in a different world with different sets of tools. What does that team look like today?
I can tell you exactly that because Omar and I have built without AI and with AI together. And we built Magic Book of Fire, which is the one that's just focused on nonfiction book writing. We built that one without AI together. Well, here's the thing: Magic Book of Fire uses AI. It's an AI writing assistant, but at the time, AI was not great at code at all, so we didn't use it in the process in any way. We only use it in the final process of being part of the mechanism. So when we did that, though, it was me and Omar. I'm designing. Omar is doing the high level stuff. And then for the mid level developers, we hired overseas. So it was very much like the same setup for us, except the mid level developers were replaced by AI.
Okay, mid-level And then did you have like a tester or a product manager or a project manager or DevOps engineer? Did you have those other roles, or did you play those roles yourself?
We played them all. It was really just like us two with no money figuring things out at first. So, I mean,
Okay.
it's just the way it was.
And then, so the change from your standpoint, and that's typical of many startups, right? You have
Hmm.
engineers who are doing many different things. So you're saying it's primarily the main change today is you have Omar and you, but then the outsource engineers, you don't need them anymore because AI is doing that part, correct?
Correct.
Which is another thing you mentioned, because I also want to ask about an interesting facet to this is outsourcing. I was not going to get there right away, but it's all right, I think. So we talk outsourcing, right? The impact on various industries because of AI and the consulting industry as well. In your example is a very real example where you actually had to rely on people that were overseas. Let me make an assumption here and correct me if I'm wrong. It is true 99.9% of the time in my experience, but it's still an assumption. Did you find the engineers overseas, Victor? Or did you have the need to find them because they were more affordable, or was it because you could not find that skill in the country that we live in?
I think it was. Well, we found them through a service, so it was more affordable and it was much faster than trying to find someone in the country.
No, fair enough, right? Which is true for the most part. And the reason I ask that is, in my experience, a lot of times when you look for people over, I know there's great people all over the world, obviously, needless to mention. But that being said, I don't have a direct experience where we've looked for certain help in the world of engineering. And we were like, yep, you know what? We've looked at every state in the country, 50 states. We could find nobody. We're going to have to go overseas, right? Now, that could be a situation when it comes to AI technologies today, because there are some very specific technologies that not, it's very difficult to find people. But most of the time, it's because it was more affordable to find people elsewhere just because of the economies of scale and cost of living and whatnot. But that money had to be saved by just shipping the jobs overseas. Now that AI is able to do more of the work, do you see a direct impact on the business of outsourcing? Because there are countries and companies that rely on it either exclusively or primarily. What is your take on it, and what kind of impact do you see it have on outsourcing as a business?
I think that it will dramatically dramatically impact outsourcing as a business. I understand why everyone in Hollywood is like, do not use AI to make movies. We want to make movies with humans writing everything. And I understand why everyone is like, don't use AI to make your logo. Use a real artist. And I understand why everyone is saying that. But when you are talking about, small businesses and large businesses, I would not I would never go to a small business person and tell them, "Hey, you you can't you can't use AI to make a logo for your new project that costs you 1 penny. Instead, you must hire a logo artist for $1,000." And you can't ask small businesses to do that. You can't think that large businesses would do that normally on a regular basis. You have to understand that if there is a cheaper way for people to get the results that they need, that often they're going to move toward those results.
And especially when the impact of that, the money you save is, say, X amount of dollars. I think you have a great example there. Let me take a parallel one too, right? I took the example of Quentin Tarantino, right? A preposterously different example because he's super talented and one of those few people in the world. But can we then
You
say,
sound like you like Quentin Tarantino a lot.
to the point that I've watched a lot of his movies like 80 times or something, and I like Christopher Nolan, and these are my two, and Clint Eastwood, probably my three favorites. Maybe there's a couple of them more.
I like
But the reason,
Quentin Tarantino movies too. Yeah.
oh yeah, it's lovely, right? The reason I asked that is writing, right? It's very difficult. Obviously, nothing is easy. But on one extreme, sure, there need to be people like that are born and live for long periods of time, so we can create quality content in movies and cinema. But when you go to YouTube and there's a lot of content there, which is pretty ordinary as well, right? Where there's a very simple, cliched storyline and somebody's acting, and then you're watching it. And I don't watch Netflix much, if any at all. But a lot of times, you're being. I'll actually take a more specific example, Victor, in a minute. But let me finish this thought process and ask your thoughts on it. So you can take the average content, and people are still willing to watch average content because you're not expecting Nolan level writing every single time you're watching content, because you're tired after a long day. You come sit down in front of the TV and you play it for 40 minutes, whatever plays, you watch it and you're done, right? You retire for the day. For that kind of writing, you may or may not need top quality writing, right? Cheap writing that the tool or platforms and AI tools generate might be good enough. Does that mean, even though there is an impact on business as a whole, the creative business, is it possible that AI is going to impact the less creative side of the creative business more? Meaning, if I'm a small time writer just trying to make a living and paying bills, I'm going to be more impacted than these mega stars of Hollywood who are creating these multi-million dollar movies in cinema?
Wait, so what is your question? Your question is,
Sorry, it was the wrong question. The question really is the impact of AI on writing. Does it affect small time writers, early writers more, and not impact these established writers who are making expensive cinema? Is my question.
I would say it'll affect the poorer writers first, the ones that don't have the resources, and then those writers, it'll affect those, and it'll also affect those writers who don't understand how to use AI to better your work. For instance, like writing with AI can actually make you a better writer if you know how to use AI correctly. Well, I think that I really hate the terminology when they're like AI is not going to take your job, but a person who knows how to use AI is going to take your job. But in this case, like if you're a writer right now, I think that working in the entertainment industry, I think that you should have some knowledge of how to use AI to make your work more make your work better, make your effort more productive.
Very well said, and which is true of every industry, right? I mean, people ask me this question, Krish, what's going to happen because AI is able to generate code? What is going to happen to developers? And I have a lot of answers to that. One of the answers is AI can surely replace developers, like you've shared that experience as well, right, Victor? You now don't need those outsourced developers anymore. But I also asked the other side of the question, which is if I can easily replace development, which is not the easiest thing to do to begin with, necessarily, not for everybody, then a developer can use AI equally to replace every other role in the team. You mentioned that you didn't start off even having these other roles in the team necessarily, but going forward, do you think there will be these engineering teams where you simply only have developers, whether they are junior, senior, or mid level, and you almost don't have other roles because those roles can be replaced easily or maybe not so easily with AI and other tools?
I Yeah, I think that the smart business in the future is going to use AI for as many things as they possibly can. Because what is happening with AI is I think that I think that I don't understand why people are not so flabbergasted at what we have at our disposal. Because for the first time, you can build mechanisms where parts of the mechanism can think. So that's a different type of machine. So in the past, we could make algorithms, but now you can tell a machine what you want, and then that machine can think and do that thing that you want if you build it correctly. And then you can connect that thinking machine to any sort of like robotic body. You can connect it to engines. You can do so much with it. But at its core, now you can build something where it can make cognitive decisions as part of its mechanism. And that is you can build an incredibly insane machines at this point. Like you could build machines as long as you can make the architecture work. You could build some pretty amazing things.
I love the use of the word flabbergasted there. I've said the same thing that you've said, just use the word excited a lot more, but I think your word choice was even better. And I agree with you wholeheartedly because we all have a finite lifespan. We don't live to be hundreds of years, right? So the time you have on earth, the more you can do, the more you can get stuff done. So using tools that can help you get there faster are tools that you'd rather have than not have, right? So I couldn't agree more when it comes to that. So let me ask you then is, so years ago, engineering development was it's still a skill, but it was a more important skill then because you needed developers for doing everything that related to software pretty much, right? You could not do it yourself if you did not understand coding and algorithms and whatnot. We've established that quite a bit that it's changed. Sure, you need senior engineers, you need people who know what they're doing to help you go through and build more complex software. But regardless, we don't need as many of them or with as many years of experience or whatnot. What does that being said, how do you see the rest of, let me rephrase the question. So that is not the most critical skill now. If we agree to that, what becomes the more critical skill? Is it problem solving? Because now everybody can generate code using the same set of tools that you mentioned. The number of tools keeps growing on a daily basis. So being a developer is not really the selling point anymore. and that's not the moat for a company, right? Because a lot of people who don't know to code can generate code as well. So everybody is now able to go to MVP a whole lot faster, which means MVP becomes not as important as it was years ago, because a lot more people can get to that point. Given that, how do you think the differentiation will happen, or what should cause the differentiation? Whether you go to an investor, or a seed fund investor, a venture capitalist, or private equity, or your customers, or end users, or subscribers, how do you make an impact and explain the difference to them? Because just having a website available is not good anymore, because everybody is now able to do it.
For me, I would say that the thing that I do is I show very clearly what my product can do that other products can't do. Um, remember I was talking about, like, some people can sculpt with a hammer, some people, hammer nails with a hammer. And so one of the things that I always do is I always look at, if I'm trying to create something, especially with AI, if I'm trying to create something in the field with AI, then I always just like say, okay, what can I do that is beyond what everybody else does? Because all things being the same, if everybody has the same tool, then you are going to, the only thing you can do is you can do more with that tool. And so, like, I look at the project as saying, like, okay, doing the basics is not enough because everybody's doing the basics.
Okay, doing the basics is not enough, but also the type of problem you're solving. In other words, let me ask that further, right? You said doing the basics is not enough, but let's say if you took a few people who are building software, and again, my previous example of you trying to go to this investor and whatnot, are you then speaking about the number of features? Is it like, hey, how much can I build? So by the time I go to MVP, then I showcase that, because that may or may not be true if that were to be the answer, because the whole notion of an MVP is that it's lean. It does not show a larger feature set. So all of us have to go to the investors, hopefully with the least number of features that we can potentially build, to explaining whether there is product market. So the number of features cannot increase. So what can be some real examples of differentiation that people can strive to provide? Is it user interfaces? Is it integration? Is it AI agents and working with those agents? What would those types of things be that tells Victor, hey, you know what? This team is a team that I would rather work with, not the other team, because they've not really proven anything so far.
I think that a differentiator is when you develop AI more like an appliance. This is how I talk about AI all the time, because AI is a utility, like electricity is a utility. And the thing about electricity is you don't want to have to deal with electricity. You don't want to fiddle with electricity. You don't want to fiddle with electricity. You want to turn on a light and the light should work. You want to turn on a television and the television should work. AI is going to power lots of devices, lots of software, but when it powers that software, most people build AI applications where it feels like you're prompting along with the application to use your AI. This is in the writing world, especially though. But then if you make AI feel more like an appliance, meaning like a thing where you ask for one thing, you push a button, you get an excellent result. Like, that is what I think is the differentiator, because most people are reveling in AI and not burying AI in the mechanism so that the user gets an experience where it doesn't, to them, it seems seamless, like an appliance would seem.
Okay. Um, so when you have these tools available today, are you looking to build the same sets of things you had in mind, but do them faster, sooner, better, nicer, yada yada yada? Or are you looking to build a different set of things that could not have been otherwise built without AI? I'm not talking about the pace, the speed, the scalability, and whatnot, but problems that you thought could not have been solved if not for these tools available today. And if so, what are some of those? If you can share an example of or two of those.
Well, I'm building things now that I couldn't have built without AI. But I also use AI to build things that work without AI, but using AI to help plan and design things too. So I would say that, like, almost all the tools that I build that are part of the Magic Book of Fire world, they're all the writing tools. Like, obviously none of them would exist without AI. And then I would say that, like, yeah, I'm sorry, what was the second half of the question? You have
No,
very
no,
long
that's fine.
questions.
No, Victor, that's fine. No, even then, if that's what you're sharing that is proprietary, then I can understand that. So even if you take an example that's outside your product, it's just a more generic question.
Mhm.
What are some of those things that could not, if you can share examples of yours, that's fine. If not, you can just see if you have another one. Things that could not be built without AI, because you said that your product has items or features that could not be built. I don't know if you're able to share some of them, but what are those features that could not be built without AI? Like
Okay,
what would an
here's
example of that be?
here's an example. Okay, so remember when I was like, right now, because AI can perform in the 80th to 90th percentile in many different areas, we have the ability to automate expert level administrative tasks, which we couldn't do before. An expert level administrative task and one that is automated as like a ghostwriter. Okay, so in Magic Book of Fire, we have a build called the Writing Coach, and this is how it works. You sit down at the writing coach and you type in the name of a book that you'd like to write, and then you type in a synopsis of a book that you like to write, or just like what you like. You want to write your life story, okay? Then what happens is it will interview you about what you want to write, and then as you respond to the interview, by the time you're done with the interview, you have a first draft of your book. I mean, that something like that was not possible previously because you couldn't build a system that would you could tell it anything. It would then examine that and then make a pre-interview set of questions for you. Take those pre-interview questions, examine those, and then based on what you said you wanted to write and its pre-interview questions about you, then it can make a full interview so that it can help you write an entire book. So like that is if you're a writer and you had infinite amount of money, you could hire a ghostwriter to help you write a book like that and help you through your ideas. But now that's available to everyone.
That's a great example. And I was going to play the devil's advocate, but you gave me a hint at the end, which you started playing it already, and I'll tell you what that is. And then we can switch gears here. I completely appreciate that example, right, Victor, where there was a detailed, specific example. But the one thing, if I could, is just to play the devil's advocate. All of that may not be able to be done that efficiently or that beautifully or at that cost, for instance, without AI. But like you mentioned, if you had a ghostwriter, if you had all of the tools and an infinite amount of money, everything that you just said there could have been done or could still be done without using AI, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I was just asking, is there another example where there was not a feasibility? In other words, hey, without this, I cannot simply find these answers at all, that I have to rely on these technologies. Are there any examples in the space of writing that fall under this umbrella?
Yeah, I think a very simple example is deep research. So with AI, you can use it to do research, this similar kind of research where you would hire multiple experts, and it would take them days or weeks to come up with that kind of research. And in the past, I used to work as a professional researcher because I worked for documentary shows. And so I would do research for those shows and I would, have to do multiple sources, et cetera, et cetera. And it was expensive for the shows to hire me. But nowadays, if you wanted to do research about your specific anything that is specific to you, like you can do it usually like at least once for free on Chat GPT a day or something like that. And so like that used to cost thousands of dollars to have someone pay attention to your problem and then do professional research. You have to know how to ask the questions correctly. But yeah, that's something that just you didn't have access to that. The general public did not have access to that. A lot of people don't use deep research, I mean, because they don't understand it, or perhaps they don't understand it, they're not aware of it, or they don't know how to get the best answer out of it. But like that is so valuable. Like research is really valuable. And so that's like available to the general public now. The ability, and you can do research about anything. People have done research. I think here's something that's great about deep research. If you use deep research and say you have a person who's ill in your family, there there is absolutely no way for most physicians to be up on every single treatment unless they're like the best physician. So you using deep research can make your experience better if you know how to find all the latest research and bring it to your doctor. Like that's something that can help you positively that wasn't available to people in the past. Things like that. Like, yeah, there's so much, but
No,
that's like a really simple example.
it's a great example. By the way, thanks for that. So as we have about 6 minutes or so, like I have a few quick questions, really short, like rapid fire. I don't have them predefined. It's just based on the conversation we've had so far. So excuse me if they're almost random because they are going to be real quick, yes, no-ish, 15-second-ish type of answers, right? So the first is, what would you tell people who are graduating from college today so they can build a career better?
I don't have an answer. I don't know. I didn't graduate from college.
Okay, no worries. That's anything is a good answer. Okay, my next question is, would you recommend, in your opinion, do you think there is value in going to college in 2020, or are people better off picking up vocational skills?
There's always value in learning. So if the college is good, I would say go. I don't know if there's a value in college or not. Again, I didn't go to college, but I think there's value in learning always.
Okay, but is there value in spending, taking a $200,000, $150,000 student loan and getting a professional formal diploma like it happened in the past?
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, no, that's good enough, right? I just want to get your take on all of these things. And if you have to give an advice in a line or two to somebody who's been in the business of building software for 15 years, 10 years, and 20 years, and then AI has not been in the mix, what would your advice to them be?
Make sure you learn it.
Okay. Should people who are developers look to change careers?
I don't think so. I think that can enhance whatever career you're on.
Earlier, you had to be a programmer in a certain language to go apply for jobs and whatnot. Given that now problem solving has kind of become a more important skill than coding in a particular language, are we looking at a world that's agnostic to language? Like in other words, if you hired a developer tomorrow, Victor, does their skill in a particular language make a difference to you, or does it not matter?
It does make a difference for like again the refining as far as like I don't think that developers need to be as fluent in every in every style of code that they're doing as they used to be, but I think that to do the final refining, that I think it helps.
Okay, if you were to start a company tomorrow that had nothing to do with what you're doing today, what would the first two positions that you hire for would be? What would those two roles be?
Sales,
Great answer.
sales, and I would hire sales, and what else would I hire? I guess I would hire an assistant to do all the admin stuff that I hate.
So not a
But sales.
developer. Not a
What?
developer. The developer was not one of those two roles, just to make sure.
No. Because here's why. Here's why. I can because I have enough developing skills to develop an MVP, and then if I have an MVP, I have something to sell, and then so I use sales to do that, and then I use the money from that to hire a developer, another senior developer to help finish my MVP, and
Okay.
then on and on. So, but I would say
Okay, and
that
what?
for me to get my work done, though, the first thing I would hire was somebody to take off the admin off of my hands so that I could focus on building.
That's a very important answer. It's going to help people as well plan their. So as we wrap this up, I have a non-technical question for you. But before I get to that, do you have any questions for me, Victor?
No, who does your hair? It's amazing.
My hair?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's always messed up, and I'm worried about. Oh my God, I have to turn on video and I have to scramble to find a cap. So it's very kind of you to say that.
Nah, it looks cool.
Any other questions?
No?
Okay, so my question to you, I mean, you live in New York City, which is my most favorite city in the world, but the question is not, I guess at least the first one's not related to that. The second question, the one I ask of everybody is, what is your favorite food? Like if you have to name, and you live in the city, I'm sure there's a million restaurants, but a dish, a food, like what your favorite dish, if you have to name one thing, what would that be? And since our audience is kind of spread out across the globe, you may have to explain that if it's not going to be that obvious.
I think mine's really simple. I love spaghetti and meatballs.
Okay, I think which even I'm vegetarian, but even I understand that. So I'm gonna have you explain this. You have another minute. Do you want to say a thing or two about New York City because there are people who've been there, people who haven't been there? If you have to say a couple of things about New York City, what would that be?
I just like enjoy the art in New York City. I live for the art in New York City.
which is, it's got everything, and that's one of them. I go try to go to the Broadway every time we are there as well. Thank you so much, Victor. Can you please stay on the call after I stop record for a minute? But I'm going to say thank you very much to Victor Varnado for taking time to
Thanks for
have this
having me.
conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was super exciting.
It was great.
I'll include the link to your company, SupremeRobot.com, so people can definitely check that out as well. And folks, with that, we're going to end this podcast here. One more time, thanks a lot, Victor.
Thank you.